Well, shwmai I chi gyd. Welcome to you all to the Argo Navis Follow the Stars Dilyn y Sêr Cynhadledd Conference. We've got people from all over the world. In fact, we've got a couple of people in the International Space Station watching as well, haven't we, Alan? I'm sure we have. They've all logged in by now, hopefully, after doing the dishes after lunch. We're all logging in. So it's I'm not too sure what kind of person I'm going to be over the next 2 days, but it's an honor to be part of this exciting event. And I thank Dark Sky Wales and all the partners involved in allowing me actually, or trusting me to be a bit of a Michael Parkinson character over the next 2 days, introducing some incredible individuals, people that we can learn a lot from and be inspired by as well. We've got Katie King, speaker. She's a speaker. She's not a double-barreled person, but we've got Katie King in a few minutes. We did ask actually Chewbacca if Chewbacca wanted to be involved, but he was washing his hair. We also asked E.T. to be involved with this event, but wasn't answering the phone. And through our good friend Sigourney Weaver, we tried to get the alien involved as well, but the agent fee was far too high, I think. So we left the alien where the alien should be left. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Katie King. Katie King is a research scientist with a passion for science, space and education. She's part of the STEM program involving science, technology, engineering and maths. She has just finished. Katie, you can hear me, yes, Katie?
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So you've just finished your PhD in Nano Technology.
Yes.
Tell everybody what nanotechnology is, Katie.
Sure. So nanotechnology is a really broad area of science that covers the control of matter on the atomic scale. So you can make lots of different technologies using it. I was looking at using it for nanomedical purposes. So it's kind of building little nano robots to go in the body, but it's a really cool growing area of science, that's for sure.
You said it's a controlling technology, yes?
Yes, that's one part of it.
I think my wife would like some of that technology from me. I'm sure Alan would as well. It's lovely to have you here. I understand that the first word of your presentation today is going to be a wonderful Welsh word, which we all use here in Wales, which you've been practicing for the last 3 weeks, haven't you? It's one word.
Yes.
It doesn't. And by the way, croeso to everybody across the world who's tuning in to this conference today and tomorrow. It is being hosted by Dark Sky Wales and all his partners here in Wales. I am not too far away. In fact, I'm in a farm. I've walked into a farm in the Cambrian Mountains of Wales, found the best place to put this little laptop, and the farmers just walked in, had a bit of a shock to see I'm here. Such is the welcome in the Cambrian Mountains. I've positioned my laptop here, and I've had such a wonderful welcome. They've even brought in some food to keep me going for the next 7 or 8 hours. But croeso, Katie, it's great to have you part of this event. We will have a Q&A for you at about 2:15, if that's okay. Not too difficult questions, please. But I might have a question for you. But I'm sure you will inspire all the viewers and the listeners here today. So, diolch yn fawr iawn, Katie, a croeso I ti.
Thank you, Shomai.
And it's Shomai back to you as well. Diolch I ti. Diolch.
Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. So I'm going to be talking today about a sort of a paradigm shift in space exploration, which I think this year, 2021, has been awful for most people on Earth. But actually, in terms of space, a lot has happened. So today I'm going to really briefly just talk about my journey so far in STEM, and also moving into the exploration of Mars and commercial space, and how this is really a time of change at the moment. Then I want to talk about, are we actually heading towards a space disaster? So as we have all this power, as the Spider-Man phrase is, with great power comes great responsibility. I think it was Spider-Man. So I'm going to be talking about that, and then really where you are needed and where we really need future generations to come in and help with this grand aim. So that's really what we're going to be looking at today. Old photo, but there we go. So when I was young, I always loved maths and science. It was always kind of encouraged in my family, and I was a bit of a nerd when it came to that, and I have no shame in saying that. So for A levels, I did maths, further maths, physics, and chemistry, and I had my eyes set on studying science at Cambridge when I was about 14 or 15. And the first time that I tried and applied for Cambridge, I didn't get in. And I was told by a lot of people who were quite close around me, that, oh, you're not smart enough, you're not clever enough, you're not going to get in, I wouldn't bother trying again. And I started to believe it, and I was like, oh, maybe I can't do this. And then I was like, no, I'm really going to try. I really, really want to do this course. So I pushed very hard for my A levels and tried again, and was fortunate enough to get in the second time round. So during my undergraduate time, I specialized in physics and chemistry, like really sort of about material science. I'm very interested in that. And as a part of my time at university, I was part of the RAF, or the University Air Squadron, which is basically like an RAF unit for students. And they have them up and down the country. So if any of you are interested in going to university, they cover all parts of the country. And I would really recommend, if you are starting at university or in university, seeking them out. So through that, I learned a lot of adventure training. I learned how to fly. And that was like my family was basically that throughout university. And the picture in the bottom right is on graduation day with my housemates at the time, who were engineers and scientists. The engineers are in gold, the scientists are in pink. So I had a pink hood at the time. So that was kind of my time throughout, like going through school and going through university. And then straight after I finished my master's there, I was lucky enough to get an internship at NASA for 2 to 3 months. And it was part of the sample analysis of Mars team, which is an instrument on board the Curiosity rover. So on Mars, there's a rover called Curiosity, and it's currently exploring the Gale crater, which is just one of the many craters on Mars. And this instrument is looking to see whether there are any remnants of organic matter trapped inside the rock. So this will let us know whether there may have been life once on Mars, or whether Mars could occupy life at some point in the future. So it's really looking at fundamental big questions, but breaking it down and bringing it back to everyday experiments. So SAM, we'll just call it SAM, is basically the size of a microwave here, and it's very, very clever. So basically what SAM does is it takes little bits of rock sample, shoves it in the top here, which is the sample inlet tube, and then it heats the samples to about like 900 degrees, very, very hot. And that basically allows volatile things to start coming out of the rock as gases. And then the gases get sorted and go through this GC, which is like gas chromatography. So it separates them into molecules, and then that can get analyzed on a mass spectrometer. So you can actually work out the identity of these different gases that have come out of this rock. And so from that data, you can work out what might have been trapped in that rock. So there were some pretty great discoveries. And one of them was the discovery of this chemical called chlorobenzene that was stuck inside one of these rock samples. And you can see this green, there's so much more in this green sample compared to the others, which didn't have any of this chemical in. And so this was like, oh my gosh, is this some sort of organic matter here? Like, could this rock type actually preserve life? And is this a hint that actually maybe there was once on Mars? So that was like a big discovery. Still ongoing questions, because it's like, okay, well, where was this actually made? How was this actually made? But my job while I was there, I've got some great photos. My first job was to run some samples with known organic molecules. So that's like bits of protein or DNA molecules on this lab like benchtop gas GCMS, so that's gas chromatography mass spec. So like those last two steps in the instrument. And I basically wanted to see what the signatures were of these different molecules. And then once we kind of got an idea for the signatures of what we might see, it was then about running simulations on a Martian duplicate. So they basically have an exact replica of Sam in one of the rooms down the corridor, and they have it like in a box within a box within a box. And that is to ensure that they basically recreate the Martian conditions. So they recreate the atmosphere in terms of the gas compositions. They also recreate the temperature gradient that Sam on Mars would actually feel. And then my job was to prepare this solution of different compounds that we were like interested in finding, injecting it in the top, and then running into another room where everyone else was. And we had to pretend that this was happening on Mars. So you can't interfere with the instrument because it's not like we can go and fix anything quickly on Mars. So we had to sit there, and other people were controlling all the valves, etc., to get the instrument to work. And they even included the lag between sending the command signal and then the instrument actually doing it, just so we could, everything was taken into account as if we were running this on the instrument on Mars. And then the data would start coming through, and then we'd see whether we could recognize or see the signatures that we were hoping for, that I had run on like the lab-based instrument, but to see if we could see the same thing coming from the duplicate. So it was very interesting. And then while I was there as well, I saw the James Webb Space Telescope being put together in the clean room. So this is, which might be interesting, I thought. So this was part of it while I was back there 5 years ago. So yeah, very exciting time for sure. So where is this going next? So that was Curiosity. And at the moment, we have 5 different rovers on Mars. There's Sojourner, Spirit, Opportunity, Curiosity, which is this one here. And then earlier this year, we had the landing of Perseverance, which is this 5th rover, which is basically looking at doing different things compared to Curiosity, which I'll go into, but it's the last step before we start looking at sending humans to Mars. So I really like this poster. So Perseverance was landed in a place called Jezero Crater. And I always find it quite an interesting question, you know, when you try and pick one place to land one thing on a different planet, like where are you going to pick? If you were to look at Earth and you were trying to decide where to land something, where are you going to land it? Because it's all very different. So they decided on landing Perseverance at a place called Jezero Crater. And the reason that they picked this place is that it was believed to have a flowing river. Sometimes the river was there, sometimes it wasn't. There are markings in the rock that make it seem like that was the case. And if there was a flowing river, there will be some clay samples there, some clays, and that has been looked at by other instruments looking at Mars. And they believe that if life will form or has formed or been formed, then the likelihood is it might be in one of these clays. So they're looking at this area. But the difference between Perseverance and Curiosity is that Curiosity, when we were looking at the Martian rock, it was doing the experiment, and then it was just sending the data back to Earth, and then we analyzed the data back there. But the difference with Perseverance is that rather than doing the analysis on Mars, it's the first step in taking the samples back to Earth in basically the most incredible robotic relay race I think I've ever heard of. So this is the plan for the Mars sample return mission. We have Perseverance, which is this first step here, which is our first team player in the relay. And Perseverance will go around Mars, collecting different samples and dropping off these little sample canisters. on Mars. And the second mission, which is a NASA and ESA mission, will have a lander and a retriever, and a retriever to go and collect the canisters. So a little robot will go collect the canisters that Perseverance had lost, bring them back to the lander, and then launch them into orbit, where you get your third player, which is going to be built by ESA, that's coming along to collect the canisters in orbit and then bring it back. We've got in the most incredible relay race, and then the samples will get analysed on Earth by us, rather than just with what we send to Mars. So I just think it's a really nice analogy of the international effort and the teamwork that is required for these big missions. And I just think it's a really cool design for a mission, and would have loved to have been like a fly on the wall for some of those discussions when they were coming up with this idea. So very exciting. But one of the, another thing with Perseverance that is really groundbreaking was the Flight of Ingenuity. So Ingenuity is this tiny helicopter that they sent out with Perseverance, and it weighs less than 2 kilograms. And what they wanted to see is whether we could actually, if we could demonstrate powered and controlled flight on another planet. So the Martian atmosphere is about 1% as thick as the Earth's atmosphere, which makes it much harder to fly things because the density of the air is so much thinner. So the rotors have to go at a much higher speed in order to get the same amount of lift because the atmosphere is so thin. So on Ingenuity, the wingspan is about 4 feet, and it's going at about 2,500 revs per minute. So it's going really, really quickly. And the first flight of this was demonstrated back in April, where it just took off, hovered for a few seconds, and then came back and landed. And this was a big deal. And it might not seem like a big deal because you've just got such a tiny little helicopter. What is it really helping us with? But the big deal with Ingenuity is that this is the first step towards maybe having heavier aircraft on Mars. Can we take drones to Mars? We could explore a lot more if we had a drone compared to rovers, because they go very, very slowly. So could we have drones? Could that actually in time lead to humans being able to fly around Mars? So this is like the first step in some big aims for what we might want to do on Mars in the future. And it's nice to see these baby steps being taken, because without them, we wouldn't be able to have those aims and ambitions for the future. So it's very exciting, in my opinion. And one of the other instruments on Perseverance, I mean, there are several, as you can see from this picture here, there are lots of different instruments going on. But the one that I think is cool is this one called MOXIE, which is producing oxygen in situ. So the Martian atmosphere is about 99% carbon dioxide. It's a very different composition to on Earth. But if we're going to be sending humans there, they're going to need oxygen to breathe. And also, if we're going to be launching them back to Earth, we also need liquid oxygen as a propellant to send them back. So MOXIE is basically a test to use electrolysis to churn the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere into usable oxygen. And that's what this is testing. And actually it's worked. So back in April, MOXIE produced about 5 grams of oxygen in about an hour. So in real terms, that's only about 10 minutes of breathing for an astronaut. And it took MOXIE an hour to make that amount of oxygen. So really it's baby steps. But it's quite interesting.
Hi, Katie. Can I try to interrupt? Could we ask you to slow down a little bit so the translators can keep up with you?
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. It's my fault. I should have mentioned it earlier.
Okay, my mistake, of course.
Thank you.
So MOXIE is producing oxygen, and this only equates to about 10 minutes for an astronaut to breathe, which isn't actually that much. So if it takes an hour to produce 10 minutes of oxygen, we're going to need a lot more in order to get enough oxygen to propel the astronauts back home, or to give enough oxygen for multiple astronauts to breathe. But it's baby steps, and we're getting there. So we have this aim internationally to go back to the moon and then onto Mars. And this is taking place this decade and next decade. And this is really the aim for the next few decades for space agencies. So going back to the moon, to a lot of people, it might seem like, what's the point? We've been there before, but we have very different aims of going back to the moon compared to before 50 years ago. So the reason why we're going back to the moon before going straight onto Mars is because we will learn so much about what it takes to live and build a base away from our home planet with that in deep space. And we can learn so much about communication, resources, how we're going to build a base before we go far further afield to Mars. So it's really a big learning opportunity for scientists, astronauts, everyone going back to the moon. And as a part of that, we're building the Lunar Gateway, which looks like this. It's basically going to be it's going to be a gateway that orbits around the moon, a bit like the space station is orbiting around Earth. And it will act as a sort of, I think of it as a little train station stop off point on our way. So this is the Lunar Gateway, and it is a hugely international project. We have NASA, we have ESA, we have Japanese JAXA, Canadian Space Agency, and Roscosmos, so the Russians, are all building parts for this gateway. And this will be launched, or the first bit that will be launched, I believe, is going to be 2026, I think. But this will be one step towards having a sort of permanent fixture around the moon. And the aims are to send the first woman to the moon this decade, as well as the next man to the moon. So there hasn't been a woman on the moon yet. But we will see it very soon. So history is in the making. And for all of these different projects, we might only see a handful of people. So these astronauts in the top left-hand corner are those that are the Artemis astronauts. So this is the team that have been picked to go back to Mars, to go back to the moon and onwards to Mars. So one of these 9 women will be the first woman on the moon, which is a very exciting thing. But behind them are thousands and thousands of people and scientists and engineers who are all working on this mission together. And this picture on the bottom, I think, is a brilliant photograph. This is the team that built Perseverance, so that Martian rover I was just speaking about. So you can see how many hundreds of people are required to make this, make these aims a reality. And it's not just the people in mission control, like the top right, it's everybody. And it's a huge amount of teamwork is required. And this is where you could be. You could work as part of one of these teams, which is very, I think, very inspirational. But it's not just space agencies and their missions. This year has really seen the birth of the commercial space side. So we have had Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, and SpaceX send civilians up into space. And they're very different in terms of their spacecraft that they've used. But it's all happened quite fast. So Virgin Galactic flew on the 11th of July, and then 9 days later, Blue Origin flew. So that's Bezos's company. Branson is Virgin Galactic. And then Inspiration 4, which is an all-civilian crew, flew with SpaceX and they went in September. So this has all happened very quickly. Yes, so they are very different though, although they might seem similar and they kind of get clumped together. They are actually very different very different companies. So Virgin Galactic is basically more like a traditional plane that goes up to high altitude, goes past the space line, and you have a few minutes in space and then you come back down to land. Whereas Blue Origin is a vertical rocket launch that goes past the space line, has a little bit more time in space, and then comes back down to land via parachute. And that gets to about 107 kilometers in altitude. And then the Inspiration 4, which is the one that happened just last month. So they orbited Earth for 3 days, which is very different to the other two. And they were at an orbit that was further out from Earth than the Hubble Space Telescope. So yes, so you can see that they are very different in their designs and actually their capabilities. So I find it very interesting to see where this might go, and yeah, develop some thoughts about it, as I'm sure everyone has. But these 3 new players have come in this year, which it marks a huge shift as to what is possible. So I was lucky enough to speak with Saresha Bandler, who is this lady here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. And she was on board the first crewed flight with Virgin Galactic. And so I spoke with her about the commercial industry, her journey into it, and she has some advice for us watching. So I'm going to play this video now, which is an interview with her. And yeah, let's see what she has to say. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone watching, wherever in the world you are. So today I'm going to be talking to Saresha Bandler, who recently returned to Earth as part of Virgin Galactic's Unity 22 crew. So welcome, Saresha, and thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. Look forward to talking.
Brilliant, thank you. So back in July, you came back with Virgin Galactic's Unity 22 crew, having flown alongside Sir Richard Branson. So can you tell us a little bit more about that mission?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was the first fully crewed mission for Virgin Galactic. That means we had 4 people in the cabin. Our vehicle always has 2 pilots, so they've been on board and they will be on board for all missions. But in the cabin, we had Sir Richard Branson, myself, my colleague, Colin Bennett, and our chief astronaut instructor, Beth Moses. And our mission and our purpose on that flight was to evaluate the cabin and evaluate the experience for our future customers. So we each specifically had a role.
And so why was this mission so significant in terms of historical space, terms?
Yeah, I mean, Virgin Galactic itself, the mission is to open space up for all. And we're looking at it by opening up access from a human spaceflight perspective for anyone that wants to travel to space to have the ability to do so. And this is that first step in our flight test program with humans to do that. We have a couple more flight tests and then we'll open up with commercial operations. So we're seeing this as that first step in opening space access up for all.
And did that experience change your perspective at all, like having seen Earth like that, which is an experience that hardly anyone has actually had? Like, how did that affect your mind?
Man, I've been trying to think of a different word than incredible, but I just not find one yet. It's just so hard to describe. It's really a feeling. It's, you're floating, it's silent, and you look out the window and you just see Earth, and it's so beautiful. The atmosphere line, that thin blue line, is just as thin as people have described it, and it makes you feel small, but it doesn't make you feel insignificant. It makes you feel like really looking at the planet the only planet you've ever lived on and known, and everything you know and everyone you know on that planet. It looks vulnerable and it makes you want to do everything you can to protect it.
And so when did you know that you wanted to work in the space industry?
But I wanted to be an astronaut growing up. And unfortunately, I don't have the greatest eyesight. And it got particularly bad in high school, actually. And, I had planned out my life of, going to do my job and become really good at it, and then joining the NASA astronaut corps. But unfortunately, in high school, my eyesight went past the requirements allowable to be an astronaut. So I was panicking a little bit because I didn't know what was next, what I wanted to do, what was my backup plan. And around that same time, there was basically a challenge called the Anasari X Prize that happened. And it was a challenge for private companies to build and fly a spacecraft to space and then do it again. So it was to test private companies to be able to fly to space and also usability in those designs. And a company won the Anasari X Prize with a vehicle called Spaceship One. And around that same time, Sir Richard Branson announced that he was going to start a company called Virgin Galactic to open space up for all. And that kind of reinvigorated me. I was like, that is the way I'm going to go to space. It's not a traditional means, but it's still a means to get to space. So flash forward to today, it just made it so much more meaningful that I went to space with Virgin Galactic. That is really, it's almost serendipitous, but it's just a new era of commercial spaceflight. It's just incredible.
And would you say that role models have been important to you in your journey from when you were young until now?
Absolutely. When I was looking at how to get to space, I was looking at the Apollo era astronauts who have all, become a test pilot, joined the military, and it was all very much the same path to get to space. And, I was looking at them because that's what I knew. And I didn't realize there was other options until I saw Dr. Chawla, who was an Indian astronaut. She passed away, but it was the first time I had saw someone doing something I wanted to do that looked like me, and sharing that identity just for some reason took the mental barriers down, and seeing her doing something I wanted to do, having shared that background, I started diving into her career. And she was an engineer. She was a great engineer. And she, after doing a lot of work in engineering, she then joined NASA Astronaut. So I actually chose to become an engineer after seeing her work and seeing what she was doing. And it really opened up that it isn't just one path to space. There's multiple paths, and you just have to find the right one.
And now you're sitting here in front of us as a role model. And what would you say to those who are listening to this, who want to get involved with the space sector, but really aren't quite sure of the route to go down?
So I'd say, just case in point, there's multiple ways to get into the commercial space sector. You really need to find just what you're passionate about and what you like to do. And that may not seem like it can fit into the space sector, but what's really magical about the commercial space sector is that it is business oriented. There's, of course, engineers and scientists, but there's also lawyers, and there's policy people, there's business. There's quite a lot of opportunities in the space sector.
And where do you see the industry being in about 10 years' time?
Well, I am looking forward to seeing a lot more people go to space in 10 years. I mean, right now we have less than 100 people that have gone to space, and less than 100 of those have been women, and a fraction of those have been people of color. And I think in 10 years, we're going to see the number of people that have gone to space increase, as well as the diversity of people that have gone to space increase. And that's diversity of background, culture, occupation, geographic, areas that they're from. And you're going to see that down to the fact. You see a lot more opportunities in space that are outside of the traditional opportunities. And I hope we'll see a lot more people utilize those capabilities to do very creative, entrepreneurial things.
And so, as a final question to you, Saresha,
what does space mean to you?
Man, I have thought about this because ever since my journey started well before the rocket motor on Spaceship 2 lit, and I've been thinking about what got me interested in space, and it was honestly looking up at the stars and wondering what my place in it was. And space to me embodies curiosity, asking questions, not being afraid to explore the unknown. And it's still that to me, even though I've been there. And I think there's so much potential for just as humanity, technological progress. So all of it is still very much embodied in space. I can't wait to share it with so many more people.
Can I come?
Of course.
Thank you. But Saresha, honestly, it's been so exciting hearing about your journey, and I'm really looking forward to following it for the future as well. So thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks, Katie.
So that was Saresha, and yeah, I love what she said about like opening it up for all and actually seeing Earth and seeing its vulnerability. So it's interesting to see that was her experience of it. It's just the beginning, but it's not just about traveling to space that the commercial side of things is working on. And this is now where I get very excited. It's about the private science aspect of the commercial space industry. So the International Space Station is due to retire in a few years. And that means that we've got a lot of space. We've got this incredible thing up there, but there's different plans as to what it's going to be used for. So there's this company called Axiom Space, and what they're planning on doing is building a private science lab and different modules to join onto the space station, where private companies can send up different science experiments that need to be conducted. So I find this very exciting, especially because as the space industry is growing, you're going to see a lot more startups just popping up all over the place, and they might need kit to be tested in space and might not be able to get the NASA astronauts, the ESA astronauts to prioritize one of their experiments, but this is a route where they can get some of their kit tested up in space. So Axiom have got permission from the space station to start building on the space station, which will start in 2024. So yeah, I find this quite exciting because it's the science side of things, and it just shows that there are the different ways of conducting science in space. And space is getting busy. We're using it a lot. We're depending on it a lot. GPS, communication systems is how we are communicating on Earth, and we are very dependent on it. And it means that more and more satellites are getting launched into space year on year. I think last year there were over 1,000 satellites that were launched into space. So this graph at the top is just showing the cumulative number of satellites over time. And you can see just around 2020, it's just completely shot up. And so this guy called Don Kessler here, he theorized in the 70s that we might start, like, as we start putting more and more satellites into space, we're going to start seeing accidental collisions between these satellites. And that if we hit a critical number of satellites up there, it's going to happen and set off a chain reaction, or chain collisions, I should say, that we won't be able to stop. And the difference, like one of the things to really remember in terms of collisions in space is that once you have a collision, all of that stuff is still just floating around, it's still orbiting. So you can't, it's like just the mess is getting bigger and bigger. So Kessler said, we're going to hit critical point probably within 50 years. And he thought that we're going to start seeing our first accidental collisions in the early 2000s. And that's exactly what happened. So in 2009, there was a collision, which I'm going to play this video if I can. So there was a collision, if this will work, between two satellites. One was a Russian satellite, one was a Chinese satellite, and they collided, forming a lot of debris that then just kept orbiting around the Earth. And all the mess is still there. And all of these different tiny bits can cause really, really significant damage to other satellites. So to give a perspective of this, what damage this can do, if you have a piece of debris that is about 1 centimeter in size, so let's say the size of a cherry, if that hits the satellite at the speeds that it's going at, which can reach up to 18,000 miles per hour, that is the same amount of energy on impact as a grenade exploding. So tiny little piece, huge explosion. So that causes a lot of damage to satellites, which could be very expensive and also very catastrophic to our life as we are depending more and more on space. So there are some efforts that are being put in play to try and clear up space junk. And this, there we go. Yes, and space junk is really important, and it's something I actually get quite passionate about, even though it's very uncool, space junk. I find it very interesting. So there are about, ESA are guessing about 128 million pieces of space junk between 1 millimeter and 1 centimeter in size. And these can cause those huge, this huge amount of damage. And so they have, like, one solution is saying, okay, whenever we put a satellite up there, we also have to take into account how we're going to bring it back down or destroy it once it's not being used anymore. So they have launched or will be launching this sort of weird 4 robotic armed instrument to collect this piece of space junk that they had launched in 2013 and bring that back down to Earth. To remove it, because this could cause a lot. If that got broken into pieces, and that got broken into pieces, that's a lot of damage that it could potentially do. And there's also this design here, which is using magnets to collect metal from around it, collect that metal, and then it will go back down into the atmosphere and burn up in the atmosphere. But just to show that this, again, 2021 has been a year of change, a new company has been set up called Privateer by Steve Wozniak, who was the co-founder of Apple. And he set up a company just last month with the aim of cleaning up space junk, because if we don't clean up our mess, space isn't going to be usable for generations to come, because we're going to hit that critical point where things are just getting destroyed. So, oh, whoops, that's my mistake. Yeah, so things are just getting completely destroyed, and we want to keep it sustainable for the use in the future. So yeah, this is a mission for us all to, that needs to be addressed. So where are we needed? What's actually out there? So if you're young, if you're at school or at a university age, then ESA have this young graduates trainee program, which is internships throughout the summers, where you can be part of teams and get a real taste of what it's like to work in the space agencies. But also here in the UK, there's the UK Space Cluster in Oxford, which has a lot of different space startups. And that is all headed by Dr. Joanna Hart. And there's some very interesting bits of technology being developed there. So that is also a place, if you look online, you can find different opportunities there as well. And also what's happening in the UK is the development and building of different spaceports, one in Cornwall and one in Scotland, where we will start launching satellites from UK soil into space. So that will open up a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunities, and it just shows you just how much everything is changing. So I would say watch this space for sure, no pun intended. And if you are interested in this, like, now is really a time of change, and in 10 years time the whole industry is going to look completely different. So there are lots of opportunities out there, but if you were to just take one message from this whole presentation, what I would want to say to you is what is said on the parachute of Perseverance. If you know what this says, you know what this says. So there's a code in this parachute as Perseverance landed, and it codes for dare mighty things, and that is their catchphrase. And that is what I would want all watching to do: dare mighty things, push, and you never know where you'll end up. So thank you so much for your time today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Shwmai, Katie.
Shwmai.
Shwmai. You're fluent now. That was incredible. I suppose I wish I'd heard somebody like you speaking as a youngster, because that was truly inspirational. Sometimes it was over my head, but if you reach an aim high enough in life, as a young person or as an adult, you can reach those things that fly over your head, metaphorically speaking, of course. But yeah, it was interesting to hear and see about that moxie thing. I found very interesting to look at. We had, I felt as if I was looking back at my childhood, and we've got some lovely questions coming in here as well. So we'll get to those in a second. But that moxie thing reminded me of a Meccano set I had as a child. And I wonder if we could get together, Katie, we could franchise that and have it as the Christmas present for 2021. The must-have on the letter to Father Christmas, as it were. But yeah, who knows? There's something like that might be possible in the future. And clearly for me, as somebody who was born the year of landing on the moon in 1969, I would love to see a woman land on the moon, and that would probably make my life complete.
It will happen. It's going to happen.
It will happen. It will indeed happen. And lovely to hear Saresha as well. That was inspiring for somebody who's actually been up there further than I've travelled, or higher than I've travelled in an EasyJet. But yeah, that's interesting. Now, one of the main questions that's coming in here, and we've got some really nice people asking questions. In all fairness, we have here from pupils, disgyblion at Ysgol y Ffrwyth. Now, I'm not too sure where Ysgol y Ffrwyth is, but I suspect it's definitely somewhere in Wales. And the question oddi wrth disgyblion Ysgol y Ffrwyth, what inspired you to want to work in the space science sector? Ar Sir Fôn, ar Ynys Môn. Felly mae Ysgol y Ffrwyth, I suspect that is Ysgol y Ffrwyth where Tecwyn Roberts is from. Rhian Hughes from Ysgol y Ffrwyth. Newch chi gadarnhau gwalchmai. I got a one-to-one conversation here going with Ysgol y Ffrwyth at the moment. But Katie, I'll let you answer that question. Now, what has inspired you to work in the space science sector?
So for me, the thing that I find really inspirational is the boldness of the aims. So just the aim, we want to put a human on a different planet. We want to try and answer questions as to how life started, where did it come from, what does it need? I find those big, bold aims and questions really inspiring, and the fact that they can get those seemingly abstract things that you think, oh no, that's impossible, can get broken down into steps that are very possible and achievable. But it takes teamwork. No one can do it on their own. And it takes teamwork, not just in small teams, but countries. And I find that aspect really inspiring. It just captures my imagination, and I really want to be a part of one of those teams.
Definitely. as somebody who goes out at night regularly, and I don't mean down to the pub for a pint, of course, but I'm somebody who stands in the Cambrian Mountains of Wales with his camera, tripod and remote control. And I often pause, I often stop what I'm doing. I sit back, I step back away from possibly reality, and I think, what is up there? How wonderful it would be to get up there. And I suppose the dark skies of Wales are inspiration in themselves, and I would suggest whatever age you are, to get that experience and get those precious moments of going out to the dark skies of Wales and looking up, thinking maybe they would be up there, or maybe I would be up there one day soon, looking back at this precious earth which we have. We've got a question here. Diolch disgyblion Ysgol y Ffridd ar Ynys Môn yng Ngwalchmai. Diolch I chi am eich cwestiwn. We've got Paul asking, are you going to be an astronaut, Katie? That is the question everybody's asking.
I mean, you know, I would not say no, and I'm definitely going to try in my life for sure. But obviously, like, the chances are slim to none. But I'm gonna keep pushing and keep trying and see what happens. See what happens in the future.
And do you want somebody to carry your oxygen box for you?
Oh, that would be great. Are you free?
Okay. There's a question here from Llio. Again, I think Llio must be in Wales. Beautiful Welsh name, as they say. How is it best to get into this field of work as an adult?
That's a good question. I would say that a lot of these new companies that are starting up are probably a good way in. So I had sort of the things that I had highlighted are more for younger audience, but there are definitely opportunities all over the place, and because the industry is growing, the skills that are required are really varied. So before, it might be, okay, you might need to be down the science route or engineering route and have academic qualifications in that, but that's just not the case anymore. It's very varied. So I would say spend some time on the internet and look up some different companies. Look at Harwell, the space cluster. Just have a little browse and get an idea of these different companies, and if there's any of them that kind of capture your imagination the most, just send an email and just really contact people online. I would say it is quite powerful. So even if job vacancies aren't official, and you show a lot of interest, then you never know what might happen.
Of course, it's a team effort as well. You know, there might be astronauts up there, but they are all reliant on the team on the ground, on Earth, as it were. You can be part of that, even though you're not quite up there, looking back on Earth, as it were.
Definitely.
And of course, Anglesey is pretty prominent in the questions here. Anglesey has strong connections, if I remember correctly, with space travel and the lunar program as well, with NASA, with Techwin Roberts. So I think there's quite a bit coming in here from Anglesey. What about the UK's space industry? Where do you see that going in the future? Of course, it's going to go to space, but you know, what interesting developments might there be there?
So it's a very good question, because a lot of the things that we hear about are happening stateside, but the UK Space Agency has got a lot of funding recently, and the big things with UK space are the development of these spaceports. So like we have our airports, and we have these are spaceports for rocket launches. So we haven't had that before, and if we have wanted to send a satellite up, which I don't think there are many UK satellites, we've had to send them to different countries for them to launch them. Okay. But now that we're having two spaceports, again, one in Scotland, one in Cornwall, we're going to see a lot more business happening, because we've got these different spaceports. We'll have different companies building rockets as well in the UK, which we haven't had before. So this is all happening this decade. So UK space is changing and it's really firing up. And the Harwell Space Cluster is where a lot of tech is happening, but that is not the only place where things are being developed.
Interesting stuff. Really appreciate your time. I've got somebody behind the camera here going 5, 4, 3, as if we're going to go into some adverts. But Katie, it's been lovely to see you. Lovely to listen to you. Your passion is clearly there, and it's a case of transferring that passion to others as well. Thank you for being part of the Argo Navis Follow the Stars conference. It's a Menter transnational project. It's received funding from Welsh Government as part of the Rural Development Programme here in Wales. Without that support, we wouldn't be holding this event. So thank you for your inspiration, and good luck in the future. I expect to see you between now and 2028 walking onto some rocket somewhere, and I'll be able to say I'll be able to say that I've spoken to that wonderful woman. And I hope the first word she says in space is Shwmai. Hwyl fawr I ti. Hwyl fawr. Goodbye and thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been really a pleasure.
Thanks to everybody for your questions. And we look forward now to the next session, which is at 14:30, 2:30, as we say here in Wales, where we look forward to hearing Danny Robertson from Awdurdod Parc Cenedlaethol Eryri, Snowdonia National Park. And Danny will be talking about the biodiversity of Anglesey and Snowdonia, most definitely in the context of the nighttime landscape, as it were. So diolch yn fawr iawn I chi. See you in the next session. Hopefully you'll be there as well, which is at 2:30. Diolch yn fawr iawn, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.